presidency, that did send, what you might say was a strong message, right? Right after Syria. So will this tough talk with North Korea be somewhat similar? Presidential historian and author of Game of Thrones, Doug Wead, he is with us now from D.C. So all these kind of historical comparisons, Doug, about what the president is saying versus what maybe he said in the past or what other presidents, Harry Truman and others, have said in the past. What about what he's done, the actions in Syria? What do you think that means for what we're dealing with now in North Korea?
Yeah, hi, Connell. Yeah, I think the tough talk is going to be helpful, not dangerous, helpful. Machiavelli once wrote that it is sometimes in the interests of a prince to feign madness. And I think the advisors to Kim Jong-Un are telling him, look, Donald Trump is powerful and he's dangerous. He keeps his word. Obama drew that line in the sand and didn't do anything about it in Syria. Trump responded immediately and powerfully. And you'll remember it was JFK's weakness in Vienna that provoked Nikita Khrushchev and prompted the whole Cuban Missile Crisis. So they respond to strength, not to weakness.
Well, if that's true, then you would think that maybe Kim Jong-Un would have already realized that and kind of ratcheted things down. But in fact, I think he's done the opposite, right? I mean, he keeps making threat after threat and hasn't backed down yet. You think he will now?
Well, Connell, he's had 3 presidents who let him get away with this. 2 Democrats and a Republican, Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama. They literally did nothing. So it's very tempting for him to believe that Donald Trump's going to act the same way. So it's understandable, but this is very dangerous because in the past, in 1958 and in 1962, when we were on the brink of nuclear war, there was an out. It was mutual assured destruction. Neither side was willing to sacrifice their people. Right. But in this case, we're dealing with a man who's already allowed millions of his people to starve to death, and we may not have that mutual assured.
Well, where do you think of mutual assured destruction? Where do you think we are now in terms of historical precedents? Because, you know, you brought up the Cuban Missile Crisis. You're not the only one to do so. Congressman Darrell Issa, I think, was one of those that I saw make that comparison yesterday. But even Sebastian Gorka works in the White House. He made that comparison today. Is this current situation analogous? And, you know, if it's not yet, do you want to even be making those comparisons at this point if you're the White House?
It's far more dangerous, in my humble opinion. In 1958, Eisenhower, it was already a hot war. The Chinese had opened fire on Quemoy and Matsu, and Eisenhower said, we will use nuclear weapons to protect Taiwan. And the Cuban Missile Crisis was very real. Those missiles, Soviet missiles, were on boats approaching Cuba, and the U.S. Navy had had a blockade. That was very real. But the difference today is that technology is so much more refined and greater. And the biggest difference is the people wielding these weapons, some are suicidal. I mean, North Korea is bankrupt and they can sell this weaponry to people who are willing to die for what they believe.
Things move so fast today. And to that point, let me ask you about the power of the presidency, Doug, before I let you go. And there have been a number of suggestions, including our first guest today, John Hanna, made this suggestion. But Neil, even before this North Korea situation had come up, had talked about it with regard to health care. And Bill McGurn wrote the piece in the Journal there some time back, that the president should turn to an Oval Office address. And maybe now's the time to do it with this crisis in North Korea and explain to the people, the American people, his thinking, you know, in a slower way that you can't do it in a quick pull report or in a tweet or everything else. Do you think that now's the time for an Oval Office address or some sort of big presidential address?
Now's the time. This transcends the tax issues and the health care issue. This is our survival. And it's time for Time Warner and Disney and ABC and Viacom, all these companies. They can make their money, but they're not going to make any money if the world is engulfed in a horrible conflict. It's time to unite. The election's over. Okay, come on.
You don't
Let's
think
come together.
That something like that would escalate it even more? I mean, I guess that would be the downside, right? Is that you want to keep the rhetoric at a minimum. And if you start to elevate it, then people start to be even more scared or get ahead of themselves.
Well, this is one of the great lessons of Marxism. It's part of the DNA, Connell. It's taught in Marxism. They only respond to brute force. The liberals were apoplectic when Ronald Reagan called the Soviet Union the evil empire. They said, no, you'll provoke them. And then he openly said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. That's what communists respond to. That's what they're taught to respond to. They're provoked by weakness. They respect strength.
Doug Wead, thank you, sir. It's always good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today. Yep, we appreciate it. More